I should have put the MD on there.
And we are live. Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Level Up Live. I am Dr. Sharita Gaskins-Tillett. I am your host. This is Level Up Live, where we feature the extraordinary accomplishments of women physicians, both inside and outside of the exam room. So, we have a really special guest with us this evening. I am really excited to introduce her to you guys. But I just want to give a few minutes for other people to come in. Please say hello in the comments. If you're watching us live, put your questions in the comments. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay, and still put your questions in the comments. I'll be happy to pass your questions along to our guest. And then, in case you don't know, at the end of tonight's broadcast, I will be revealing the location of our fall retreat a weekend for me. So I'm really excited to tell you where we're going. I'm looking forward to it immensely. So let's get started. So our guest this evening, and you know what, Dr. Shauna, I did not ask you how to pronounce your last name. Dr. Shauna, is it Bomer or Bomer?
Balmer.
Bomer. Dr. Shauna Bomer is a wife, mother, and anesthesiologist living in South Central Pennsylvania. For fun, she refers to herself as a Southerner displaced north of the Mason-Dixon line. Growing up with a mother who loved to create, she learned how to knit, crochet, and sew, among other crafts. On their honeymoon in 2008, Shauna and her husband bought a bar of handmade lye soap. After using said soap, Shauna became fascinated with learning how to make soap from scratch. She didn't actually try it until 12 years later. In January 2020, ironically just before the first wave of the COVID pandemic, she made her first loaves of soap and immediately became enthralled with the process. By the end of 2020, after posting her soaping adventures on social media and being asked by friends to start selling, Shauna and her husband launched Bawauna Bath Body. Now she juggles family and her full-time job with running a business where she makes everything. Wow. Good evening. How are you, Dr. Shauna?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing with us. And as I mentioned in one of the Facebook posts earlier, I've been following Dr. Shauna for a while. And when we had our spring retreat a weekend for me, I reached out to her at kind of the last minute to ask for some bath and body products, and she was, very gracious and indulged us. My whole downstairs in my house, once the box came, everything just smelled wonderful. It smelled so delicious. And everything has been great, and everybody loved the products. So let's start with that. And then I guess I will ask you to tell us about your path through medicine. Did you always want to be a doctor? How did you end up, in anesthesia?
Medicine was always the thing I wanted to do. Funny enough, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she was feisty. Apparently, that's where I get it from. And I remember, growing up with the same stereotypes that a lot of us still deal with this day, is that all doctors are male and all nurses are female.
Yeah.
One day I told my mom, I said, I want to be a nurse and I want to work with babies. And my mom said, if you're going to go in medicine, just be a doctor. And I said, but I'm a girl. And she said, girls can be doctors too. And I was like, what? So she planted that seed early
Okay.
on. And as a young kid, I was like, I don't know if I could do this. But as time went on, it became, yeah, I'm going to be a doctor. And I've always wanted to be in medicine in some way. And then that it grew from that statement to where I
Okay.
am now today.
That's wonderful. So now tell us about anesthesia. What made you choose anesthesia of all the things one could choose?
Funny enough, that was at the bottom of my list when I went into medical school. I had
Really?
zero interest in anesthesia. I was dead set on doing emergency medicine. And I had been a nurse aide for 3 years before I went to medical school. So I was on my way to my trauma surgery rotation. I did 3 months of trauma surgery for my general surgery. And I was talking to one of the nurses I had worked with, and she was considering becoming a nurse anesthetist. And she said, you really should look into doing anesthesia. And I was like, not even a consideration. It sounds like the most boring job in the world, because as most people, I didn't understand what anesthesiologists
Yeah.
did. And so on my surgery rotation, after she tried to convince me, I would, sidle on up to where the anesthesiologists were and be like, hey, what are you doing up here? And if I had any, a few minutes of free time, I might wander by the OR and see if I could shadow one of them. And by the end of the rotation, I was like, they actually do a lot more up there than I realized. So I made that my first elective rotation in fourth year of medical school.
Yeah.
And, by that time, you're already starting to apply you're starting your residency application process. It's very long, convoluted, complicated process that we all know about for the match. And I was already doing everything for emergency medicine. And I went to this rotation about 4 days in. The attending says to me, one of the attendings, I don't have a resident today. So why don't you come to the operating room with me and you're going to be my resident today?
Oh, wow.
And I got to go in there and I got to do everything. I got to, give the oxygen. I got to push the medication. I got to put the breathing tube in. Something happened on the monitor. He said, what do you want to do? I said, let's give this. We did. And it fixed what was on the monitor. I was like, whoa, that is so cool.
You were sold.
I was sold. So by the end of that day, I went back to wherever I was staying at that time. And I said, I started redoing my entire application, which was a long process to start with. You got to click and unclick a whole bunch of things and look at different programs and such, and not a cheap process either. So by the end of that day, I was redoing my entire residency application to go into anesthesia. And I haven't looked back since. I love it.
Wonderful. Well, now, anesthesia is a broad field. And it's my understanding that you've niched down to OB anesthesia. So how did you get there? Because OB, as we were talking, Dr. Shauna and I were talking before we came on air, labor and delivery unit is a very unique animal. So how did you end up in OB anesthesia specifically?
Well, I don't do just OB, but I do a lot of OB. I do general OR as well, but we are still considered a community hospital. We closed down the labor and delivery unit at our small hospital and moved everything to this one. So it became much busier. And we split our call between OR and OB. And it just so happens I've teased my colleague who makes the schedule. I'm like, are you putting me through a fellowship? Because I've done so many OB calls lately, like up there all the time. But, I don't necessarily mind it. It's actually fun. And as I was telling you, there's a great deal of satisfaction in calming down a mom and getting her comfortable enough to enjoy the labor process. And every once in a while, get a declaration of love from them.
I bet you do. Probably more than every once in a while. I always tell people when I got my epidural, the birds started singing. It was like I was so miserable. And then all of a sudden it was just a calm and a peace. And it was beautiful.
My brother told me when his wife was in labor, she's like, I can't do this. I can't do this. He said, as soon as the epidural went in, it kicked in, it was like a switch flip.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, this is fun. And he was like, what just happened?
I mean, it's such misery. It's such misery until all that pain is gone.
And then you're like, oh,
so thank you for all of the millions of women, all the millions of women out there.
And I always laugh whenever they say, I was trying to go without. And it's like,
why?
You still get to take a baby home. You don't get a reward.
You're absolutely right.
Just enjoy it.
Absolutely right. I agree 300%. So now, tell us, how did you, so you're now also running a business.
Yes.
Bath and body products. How did you end up here? I know, in your bio, you talked about being introduced to soap making, but tell us a little bit more about that process.
So as in the bio, you were talking about, just the love of making things. Sewing, knitting, crocheting. In high school, I actually briefly had a business of candle making.
Oh, okay.
I'm all over the place, apparently. I'd like to joke that I collect hobbies. So the soap making journey was about 12 years in the making. I was looking into it, but when we got married during residency, so you're working 80 hours a week. Wasn't going to be making soap during that. And then we finish, you're taking your board exams. Then we're trying to start having a family. Then we have a baby. So all this time, that's why it took 12 years to finally get to making my first loaf of soap. And in the meantime,
I learned something. I didn't know that it was called a loaf of soap.
Oh yeah. If you make a big
the whole thing,
we call a loaf, and you put it down in bars. You can make an individual molds. I mean, there's all kinds of ways of doing it. But I had beginner kits down in my basement from a website called Brambleberry for about a year, 2 of them. And I had another doc mom if you, I don't know if you're in the crafter group or not, but
I'm not.
Lily, her name is Lily, and she was posting all the time. And she would have these launches where she would launch her soaps, and her soaps are like works of art. She like really put flowers on top, and her photography of them is amazing. So she also collects hobbies, and she mentored me a lot and answered a bunch of my questions very graciously, just with utmost patience with me. And then finally, one of the CRNAs that I worked with, who also made soap, she's like, just do it. You're putting it off, and you're finally going to do it. And you're going to be like, why did I wait so long to finally do it? So I did finally do it in January 2020 and was hooked. But as we know, 2020 was a very stressful year for many reasons, not just a pandemic. And an anesthesiologist, we have a lot of critical care training as well. So we were helping cross cover the ICU because we were lowering our OR census. And those of us who were back in the OR were covering more calls. So it was very, very hectic, very busy, very stressful. On top of that, my mom got very sick, and my dad, both my parents got very sick, not with COVID. My dad had broken his hip and was having some struggles with that. And then my mom started getting fluid around her lung and all this. And, you know, as doctors, we know you get fluid around the lung, first thing you think of cancer, right? And she had had a lumpectomy when I was in residency. So she went into the hospital a couple of times to get treated. And in May of 2020, she went in for the last time. And my dad went in the same day, and turned out he'd had blood clots in the lung, a DVT in the leg, and then he was an AFib, an irregular rhythm. And my mom, of course, you know, we were certain by this point in time that it was cancer, and she passed, but we're still dealing with her. I had to plan the funeral because my dad wasn't feeling well, and we're dealing with his health issues. I'm the only medical person in the family. One brother is dealing with my dad. The other brother lives out in Nevada. So there was a lot of stress in 2020 going on, and working on the soap and being creative and just learning as I went. And it was cathartic for me. It was a stress reliever, and it just kept building and building and building. And I kept doing more and more, and just trying new techniques, coming up with a new formula to see if I like that better than the last formula I made. Just trying to perfect my bar of soap just for my own purposes. But in the process, you end up with a lot of soap.
So then it was like, well, what do I do with this?
I have a mountain of soap now, and I was giving it away to friends and everybody. But as I was getting better and better with it, I still wanted to make more, even though I had no use for this much soap. And finally, Lily was just like, just sell it. And she said, then you'll pay for your hobby.
Right.
I didn't want to at first because she was selling her soap, and she says there's plenty of room for all of us.
Right. You know, someone told me, think about the bread aisle and how many different brands of bread there are.
Exactly.
Right? There's a cereal aisle. There's room for one more. So there's always going to be something unique about it.
Right. You know, we all have our different formulas and, you know, different fragrances and everything. So she was actually incredibly supportive, and she's like, I'm not worried about competition. Don't worry about it. Just sell it. So I was posting it on Facebook, everything I was doing, and people started saying, are you going to sell it? They were asking me to sell it because they wanted to buy it because they love handmade soap. They knew me. They wanted to give it as gifts, all this. So I went to my husband kind of laughing one day, because as long as I have known him, he has always wanted to have a business, but we can never figure out what business would be the right fit for us. So at some point in 2020, I walked up to him and I was like, I think we found our business, because I love making stuff and people want to buy it. And he said, that's great. Let's come up with a 5-year plan. And I said, no, I'm launching by November.
Oh, wow. So he wanted a 5-year plan in advance of the business.
Right. Exactly. He was planning like 5 years from now, we'll launch a business. No, we're talking like 3 months from now, I'm launching a business.
Get on this train, buddy. It's moving.
Exactly. With or without you, we're going. And it was amazing. And just because, you know, I've known so many people over the years, from high school all the way through like college, and the time I was working as a nurse aide, and then medical school and residency and my current job. So many people were following that journey on Facebook. When I finally launched that first day, which was Small Business Saturday of November 2020, I had like 60 something orders by the end of the day. And it was, I was so overwhelmed. I was like crying.
Right. But now tell me this though, because you make everything by hand.
Correct.
So how do you manage your time in such a way that you can meet 60 orders and still be a mom and a wife and an anesthesiologist?
So that, I mean, that's not the same volume I get now every day, thankfully,
Okay.
because I wouldn't be able to keep up with that. I'd have to hire somebody right now. But that was stuff that was already made. So I had that going for me then. It was months leading up to that all this stuff
Sure.
was already made. But it did take me probably a good 4 or 5 days to get all those orders packed and out, um, which was a long process. But some of the things I do in order to maintain it is make large batches. So in the beginning, I was making like a 2.5 pound batch of soap. Now I make anywhere from 10 to 20 pounds of soap at a time in
Oh,
one
wow.
fragrance. Yeah, and soap, a lot of people don't know this, but it needs cold process soap like I'm making needs to cure for at least 4 weeks after you make
Oh,
it. Yeah. So it's not like
interesting.
you make it and like 2 days
You
later.
can use it. Yeah.
Um so, I make large batches. That helps a lot. I do have a hard time sometimes like getting bath bombs and such made out far enough ahead of time. So pretty much everything I do, I try to make large quantities so that I have it on hand for a while.
Okay.
I like to tell people though that I just don't sleep enough.
Well, yeah, I can imagine that. So tell us now. You started the business. It's growing, right?
Yes.
Because I've been following. So
Mhm.
tell us how it's growing.
Um, Straight off the bat, another anesthesiologist friend of mine had a sister who's an esthetician, and she owns a spa. And in that spa, they sell a lot of products. And she said, "Your products are perfect for my sister's spa." She wants to sell them. And I was like, "I'm not ready yet." It was about a year after we started when I finally said, "I think I might be ready to take on a wholesale account." So we contacted her, and that was our first wholesale account. Um, I'm posting on all the different social media platforms. So I do have a YouTube, I have a TikTok, I have Instagram, I have Facebook, and slowly through that, we are growing. And I post on all those videos of making the soap or making the bath bombs or, cutting the soap. Like every step of the way, you can see kind of how this all comes to fruition. And
Now,
then
how did you
just,
branch out from soap? Because you say you started with soap, but
mhm,
now you also do lotions and I mean, well, you do the bath bombs and the shower
shower.
fizz things and and a number of other products. How did you figure that stuff out?
So the bath bomb story is actually pretty funny. Um, I am not a huge bath person. I'm more of a shower person. But my son spotted a bath bomb making kit at a store, and he was bound and determined for a year to get this kit and make bath bombs for mommy. And I didn't have the heart to tell him I don't really take baths. I just get bored. Like, my mind's going too many places at one time. I have to have something to do. Like I have to read a book or something. Otherwise, I can't stand the bathtub. I just feel like I should be doing something else. Um, so with him, we made bath bombs. Excuse me. And of course, people were like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool. You should sell those too." And that started a journey of trying to perfect the bath bomb because those kits you get, they're not
I
they're
can
not great
imagine.
bath bombs. They're
Yeah.
not. So that started the journey of trying to perfect the bath bomb. And then the body balm sticks that I make, that was actually something just like a side interest before I even was doing soaps. And then people, I would pull people like, what are you looking for? What would you like? What do you think I should maybe look at making? And they would give me suggestions. And I think that might be where the shower steamer idea came from. But that's one my secondary to the soap. That's my favorite product to use.
Okay.
I love
Yeah,
it.
it's very nice.
Yeah. And
Very,
that seems
very
to be what
relaxing.
pulls a lot of other people in too. Like, if you don't have time to soak in a bathtub, you take something into the shower with you to give you a nice aroma and maybe open things up a little bit for you. So it basically, it's just, I keep trying to think of what else you would want out of a bath and body business. And then I want to learn how to make it. I just have, I think, as physicians, we just kind of have this natural desire to learn, you kind of have to, to be in this business.
Absolutely.
And I've always wondered how they do it. And that was really what the soap was. I was like, wow, people still make soap using lye. How does that work? I'm just curious. How does that work? This is how I ended up cloth diapering my child. How do cloth diapers work? Like, why doesn't it leak?
Yeah, yeah.
That's, all these different journeys. Like, how do you make bread by hand? Oh, okay. I'm just very curious and wonder how things are done. And then I start doing it.
Wow. So it almost sounds like you're soap making is self-care, a form of self-care. Would you
Can be, yeah.
agree with that?
I mean,
Yeah.
owning a business can be stressful, with no doubt about it, and it's a lot of work. But there's a certain creative process in there that's just a lot of fun. And sometimes, I'll make the same kind of soap, but I might change up the way it looks a little bit, or sometimes the batter doesn't react exactly the way and the design doesn't come out the way you thought. I just made a soap the other day, and after I made it, I thought this turned out a lot more 90s looking than I intended. It was not what I saw in my head.
Like the color? What made it
Yeah,
nice?
it was like a really deep, deep, deep dark purple, and then I put like a regular purple and a pink in there, and I was thinking black raspberry vanilla. And then when I finally finished, I was like, that looks very 90s. I didn't even think about that.
So what did you name it? Did you name it something else after that?
No, I think it's curing right now, but I think it's still probably just gonna be black raspberry vanilla.
Okay, all right. Now, do you do custom orders in terms of, if somebody has an idea of a couple of different kinds of fragrances they'd like to mix together? Do you do those kinds of things?
I have not actually launched that service yet, but it's something we have talked about. We just have to come together, figure out pricing on that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, if you want to do this many colors, if you want to do this many scents, or, or this big of a loaf or such. So that is something we have talked about, and I know a lot of people do. I haven't done that yet, and I haven't really had a lot of people requesting it yet.
Okay.
But it is something that'll be there in the future.
So what are you working on now?
Oh, trying to get stocked up. So our latest growth was that there is a store downtown in our little town. It's a beautiful store with home goods in it and some snacks and things like that. But it's just absolutely gorgeous store. It's mostly home decor. One of the part-time employees is a retired nurse that I worked with in pre-op. And she contacted me and she said, your stuff would be great here. So we have now set up in there. The boon there is that it's summertime, going in summertime and fall, they have lots of little events downtown. So like July 15th, they have an event where they'll close down the downtown strip and people will walk around and do things. They do like food truck vendors. And then we have an apple festival and such. And their store is so nicely located that they get so much traffic during that'll help really get the word out.
Yeah.
So it's local, this is a truly local product for them.
So is the goal to transition to growing the business more and hiring employees and, letting that be your primary thing, or do you intend to keep juggling?
For now, I'm going to keep juggling. There have to be a lot of soap sold for that to be our primary. But yes, there is the ultimate goal for the business to continue growing and eventually need employees. We are actually building a house soon. And we just purchased the land back in February, and we're going through plans right now. And part of our plans with this property is to build a large building strictly for the business and allow us to grow. So I can keep everything, get everything out of my house, which would be great because there's a lot of stuff in my house right now. And have everything in one place instead of, like some of my stuff's in the basement, some of it's in the kitchen, some of it's upstairs on the second floor. And it'll organize it. And that'll help us to not only streamline things a lot more to make it easier to expand, but also allow us to have a space outside of our house where we can bring employees in and work.
Wow. So now this is not just your business, right? It's a family affair.
It is. My husband does the background stuff. So he takes care of the taxes. We have a whole website and marketing team now. So he primarily works with them. Every once in a while I communicate with them, but he does most of that stuff in the background that I don't want to do. I don't want to deal with the financial part. He does all the numbers back there. And my son is not really credited a lot, but he comes up with some ideas too. So he's 8 years old. He loves also to create. He does not have the patience for cold processed soap. I can tell you that right now. So anytime he makes soap, it's usually melt and pour. But every once in a while, we might make that available, like, hey, Zeph's Corner, here's something. But he comes up with some fragrances sometimes. One time I was making some body balms and he said, I want you to make an apple vanilla body balm. And I was like, I hadn't thought of that. And I made it and it was a big hit. People loved it.
Oh, wow.
Like, oh, okay. So every once in a while he comes up with very strange fragrance combinations. And we're like, that's not going to work. But then he'll come up with a really great one. So he does contribute to the business as well.
So what's your favorite fragrance combination?
Ooh, that really depends on what it is. I think for relaxation, spearmint eucalyptus is one of my
Hmm.
favorites.
Okay.
Um, that has been a favorite combination of mine probably for more than 20 years now. A lot of people like lavender vanilla, which I think actually for
Yeah,
the
yeah, I'm a lavender and a vanilla person. So when you
yeah,
told me to have them together, I was sold.
woo! Um, and then one of my favorite unisex fragrances that we carry is called Magnolia and Tonka Leaf.
Hmm.
And it's not something that you would think would be unisex. You hear magnolia and all that, and
Right. Yeah.
herbal. You wouldn't think manly, but pretty much everybody who has ever smelled that one has loved it. And it's I think it's an underrated one that people don't give a chance, and they really should.
Wow. I think it's wonderful that it's your self-care providing things that,
Mhm.
are part of other people's self-care regimens.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think it's beautiful.
And
Very, very,
it's
very
great
nice.
when people, they put together care boxes for other people and they buy our products to put in those care boxes. Um, so yeah, it's fun, and I have to say that probably my biggest customer base is other female physicians
Interesting. Okay.
looking for self care.
So tell us, so since, a lot of women physicians watch this show, tell us how they can find you and find your products.
We have a website. It's fairly easy to find. It's BawaunaBathBody.com. It's BAWAUNA, bathandbody.com. That's our website. And if you are on social media, you can find us on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, as I said before, or even on YouTube, which I think we're streaming there now, right? So,
Yes.
and I have links through all of those as well. That is the best way to get our products. If you are local, which I don't know how many local people we have watching, but Willow and Birch in downtown Chambersburg, Pennsylvania is also carrying a selection of our products. So those are great ways to find us, and hopefully we'll be in more places before too long.
Hopefully. So
Oh,
now you reminded me of a question I've been dying to ask you. The
okay.
name. How did you come up with this name? What is the name?
Most people ask me that, and it's funny. So it comes from a childhood nickname for my brothers. I have 3 older brothers,
Okay.
and they used to call me Shauna Bomer.
Okay.
And when we were trying to pick a name for the business, at first we were going to go with Dr. B's, but there are other businesses with that name, not necessarily bath and body businesses, but it's enough that it would be confusing if you were trying to search for Dr. B's. You might find these other businesses and not us. So my husband is trying to come up with a more unique name. And my personal Instagram handle was Shauna Bawauna because I was just trying to find something silly to make my
Sure.
Instagram handle. And he came out one day, he's like, "What about Bawauna?" And I was like, at first I was like, I don't know about that. But then it started to kind of grow on me. And I was like, that's unique. It's personal. It just fits. And my husband's
Okay.
name is Brad. So you can also say
Oh,
it's kind of an amalgamation
yeah.
of Brad and Shauna. So,
Okay. Yeah,
so
I wondered.
a lot of people do wonder. I get asked that question a lot, which is fun because, it's a talking point.
Absolutely.
It makes it more personal.
Indeed, indeed. So we do have a couple comments in the chat. Somebody said your mom is a smart woman for planting that seed when she told you to be a doctor.
Yeah,
Um,
that's actually for my friend Margaret. Hey, Margaret.
and then Dr. Tawana is also a collector of hobbies. As you see here, she makes soaps, candles, wreaths,
Yep,
photography. So, Dr. Tawana, if you're not a part of the crafting group, you should probably join.
absolutely.
Let's see. And then she also says she loves lemongrass.
I do have some lemongrass. I need to make some things with that. I part of my problem is that I just want to try all the fragrances and I don't have enough time or space for all of them. And I have a fragrance problem right now. I gotta use them up. My husband keeps harassing me, do not buy any more fragrances. I'm like, I want to try them all.
Right. How are you supposed to, do
Exactly.
the mad scientist thing without
How
without
are
more
we gonna know if we like it or not if we don't try it, right?
Exactly. Precisely. So thank you so much for coming on. I like to end on a variation of the same question.
Mhm.
And so for you, I would ask if people are looking to up level their creativity, to cultivate their creativity, what's the single best thing you would recommend that they do?
don't be afraid to fail, I would say. Just, I
Okay.
mean, you just got to get out there and do it and learn from your mistakes and keep going. And I can tell you, I've made a few soaps that were not that great, but I learned from them
Yeah.
and continue to learn as I've been doing this now for 3 years and I'm still learning as I go.
I
And
think that's great advice.
yeah.
I do. I think that's great advice because I know that, for me, that stops me from doing a lot of things. I think I'm not going to be good at that.
Right. You
But,
think you're really good at
who's good at anything in the very beginning? Most
right.
people
You never
aren't,
are.
right? You got to try something out and, and perfect your skills,
Going back to what we were talking about before, like when I first started doing epidurals, I was scared. I was afraid. It took me like 15, 20 minutes to get the epidural in. I can do an epidural in 4 minutes now, and I'm confident about it. But that's just because, I started out and I didn't do so well in the beginning, and my attending had to bail me out. And now, after years of doing it, I can do it probably with my eyes closed almost.
So you just have to take that same resiliency and apply it to other parts of your life.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, guys, as I promised, at the end of the broadcast, I was going to be announcing our fall retreat. Now, bear with me because you guys know I'm a little bit technologically challenged, but I think I came up with a creative way to share it with you. I'm going to try. And if not, then I'll just have to tell you. So yeah, Dr. Shauna, keep your fingers crossed. Okay?
Fingers and toes.
Yes, fingers, toes. Anything else you got to cross it because we're going to
cross
see
your
how
tongue?
this goes. So let's see. I'm going to try, guys. Are you guys seeing? I hope you're seeing. I hope you're hearing. So we are actually going to Puerto Rico.
Woo! Wow.
So we're going to spend from November 2nd to November 5th in sunny Puerto Rico. So I hope you can join us. Registration is not yet open. But what I will say is go to www.aweekendforme.com to get on the mailing list so that you will be among the first to know when registration does become available. Because I've been getting a lot of inquiries. When are you doing the next retreat? The last retreat was so wonderful. So, get on the list because this one will sell out. You do not want to miss it. I am so excited. I can't wait to show you guys the venue and everything. I have to finalize the contract before I can do that, but I am just over the moon excited, and I hope you guys can all come. So that's it. Puerto Rico.
Woo! That's amazing.
So thanks again, Dr. Shauna, for joining us. Thanks for crossing your fingers and your toes and that the technology would work. I wish you much, much success with Bawauna. Wonderful, wonderful products, guys. Please check them out. I'm going to put her contact information in the comments. Like I said, she was very gracious with me with the last weekend for me. It's like, ideas come to me at the last minute. It's like, oh, it'd be I remember Dr. Shauna makes these soaps. I should contact her. And she's like, when is your event? She's like, well, I think I'm off. I think I can put together a few things.
We got it.
And she did. It was wonderful. So thanks again and good night. We'll see you all next week. Take care.
Good night.